Hey guys, it's Dave. I made a video yesterday kind of going over a looming crisis potentially in commercial lending. And I wanted to dive in a little deeper into banks because we also had some bank failures here recently with Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley Bank. And it kind of reminded me of I actually read a book not too long ago that kind of described and really told me how banks can lend money and have like just the whole deposits versus loans and the ratio that they have. It's an excellent book. And I think you should read it as well. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you want to geek out over the Federal Reserve and how banks work and kind of the cyclical credit cycle that we get into that goes back hundreds of years, and we end up with inflation, and we end up with wars, and we end up with rate hikes and rate cuts and all of this kind of stuff. It's a great book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. But it explains, and I'll kind of break a little bit of this down for you here, kind of how banks take your deposits and lend them back out. I thought originally that it was like, they pull my money in and your money and everybody's money, and then they lend it back to us. But if you think about that, like they still owe me my money. If they've lent my money out to you, then how can I get my money back? So, they're able to actually lend 10 times the amount of deposits that they have by law, which is kind of created out of thin air, just money that kind of comes from nothing. It's backed by the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, and they do all of this kind of stuff. But if I put in 100 grand into a bank and deposit it, and they lend you 100 grand, and I want my 100 grand back, how do they get it? They don't get it from a third party who's put 100 grand in. They have to do certain things. They've lent out more money than they actually have in possession. 10 times that. They're required to take in or to hold 10% of the liabilities that they have. So I wanted to kind of show you an income statement and an asset and liability sheet. This is kind of basic accounting that, if you're a person that makes an income, it goes in as your income and then goes out as an expense. That's pretty much like your W-2 stuff comes in, goes out. If you have enough left over that you can save some and put it down here as an asset that goes into a bank, that's an asset, and it can earn a small amount of interest back up here as income. You can have rental properties that also produce income. You can have a 401k that produces an income, and then you have your monthly expenses. If you have a mortgage over here, or you have a car payment or student loans, then these are liabilities that end up being expenses that go out that way. That's just the general income asset statement in a graphic form. This is straight from Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame. This is how he teaches financial education. But I like it because it puts a visual on how things are in terms of like just instead of looking at a spreadsheet for pluses and minuses and stuff like that. When you are a bank, everything is flipped. So when I deposit money into a bank, that is a liability to the bank because they owe me that money back, and maybe plus interest, 0.01% interest or something like that if it's in a savings account. And then when Sally puts money in and Joey puts money in and all of that kind of stuff, those end up being liabilities on their balance sheet. They owe you that money back. So when they go and create assets, which are loans, then that's what's producing income for the bank is the loans. And like I said, they're able to do this 10 times over what this amount is. And so what happened with Silicon Valley Bank is they not only did like mortgage loans and stuff like that. In fact, during the pandemic, everybody's getting money and making deposits, and so the bank deposits are going in there, and they can make loans. They can do all kinds of stuff. They don't just do it on mortgages or car loans. They would put it into like treasuries or bonds or different investment vehicles that would allow them to earn an interest and diversify what their deposits are. So what ends up happening, here's like a chart of the 2-year treasury. And so you have this trough right here during the pandemic where a 2-year treasury is going to make you 0.15, 0.18, not very much. And even as recently as like, what is that, October of 2021, you're at like a quarter of a point or a quarter of a percent of interest. So if they're taking these deposits in and putting them to diversify into like a 2-year maturity bond or something to that effect at this point in time, it's now tied up. So my 100 went in and they put that 100 into a security like a treasury bond or something like that, and it's tied up. So when I say, hey, I want my money back, they don't have it. They have other people's money, all of those liabilities that are on there. But as you can see, as this chart goes on, like the reason that I would want to take my money out of that bank, who now can only pay me a 0.01% interest on my savings, because this is what they're making on those investments. While other people that haven't done that, look at what the treasuries are doing now. They're in the 4% range. I've recently bought 2-month T-bills from the treasury that are yielding like 4.6%. So I want to take my money out of that bank that's paying me point nothing and I want to make 4.6%. Well, if they have to give too many of us back our money, they don't have it and they have to sell these securities at a loss. So that is a really tricky situation. They could just see these things out and they would have made a profit. But if you're having to dump an old treasury note that's yielding point nothing, you're not going to be able to sell that to anybody before it matures and make any kind of profit. Not when the going rate is 4%. You're going to have to cut it bad and take a loss. Now you're looking like a bank that's in trouble because you're taking losses on all of these. And that starts to snowball where you have more people wanting to take their money out of the bank, because not only do they make a better interest rate somewhere else or in another asset vehicle, but you're looking like you don't have enough money and you get a run on the bank. So that is exactly what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. They had money tied up in low interest earning stuff while people wanted to get their money back, and they weren't liquid enough to handle a run on the bank. So the Fed had to come in, step in, and backstop that. You had Credit Suisse ended up having to get bought out by, I think it's USB or UBS or one of those places. But it's kind of interesting. Like there's probably a little more of that to happen. Although the further we get past that really low interest rate in fixed assets like that, then the safer we become. Also, just a general calmness of, not everybody has to pull all their money out at once, can allow them to spread losses, smaller losses out over time and be okay. And so they don't believe for now that this is going to spread into other areas of the economy, that this isn't going to be the first domino of a series of banks to fail. See my video yesterday on commercial. That might be something that starts a domino. I'm a little bit nervous about that one, but this, you'll probably see spotty little banks get into trouble, smaller ones. The big banks, they have to go through stress tests. Chase, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they have, after 2008, they put all kinds of regulations on them and they have to do regular stress tests. I mentioned Wells Fargo in the video yesterday. They had the highest amount of exposure to office lending at like 36 or 38 billion, but it was still like 3% of their commercial, their overall commercial lending portfolio. So it's not like, it's like they could lose 3%. It's not, that's big. It's 38 billion, but it's not going to topple the bank. So, anyways, I just think it's interesting. This particular, income and expense report and just the flow of money I thought was very interesting from Robert Kiyosaki. And then just learning that a bank can, lend money out of thin air. And it's backed by the full faith and trust of the government and that kind of stuff. But it's really tricky how it's no surprise that all the big buildings in all the downtowns are owned by banks, because they literally can 10x their money, like just by convincing you to deposit it into a checking account. So interesting, pretty neat stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you do want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe. I plan on doing a lot more kind of educational stuff. I focus professionally as a realtor and investing in real estate and helping other people do that. But we're in times now after the pandemic and a lot of the stimulus that we've had and some very historic interest rate hikes that's really shaking up my particular industry. And I just have spent the last couple of years really trying to understand how all that works. And then I'm going to communicate and share that with you. So thanks a lot for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.